Brahmanda Purana, Part 4, Lalita Mahatmya, Chapter 22. Durmada and Kuranda slain. The sounds of the Dundubhi, the great war drum of the leading Asuras that rose up then, became a proud response of sound to that produced by the war drums of the army of Sri Lalita. The three worlds shook and trembled on account of that sound that deafened the worlds, suppressed the cardinal points, and stirred up the bowels of the ocean. The sound of the war drums of the Daityas suppressed the cardinal points, pierced the caves of mountains, and overwhelmed the extensive firmament. The Jhallari, a kind of drum of the demons, produced a loud, harsh, and discordant sound resembling the proud roar of infuriated Humkara of the great man lion Vishnu. Thereupon crores of Daityas producing reverberating, chattering noise furiously prepared themselves to fight against Parameshwari Lalita. One of them covered himself with a coat of mail wonderfully studded with gems and jewels of various kinds and colors. He shone like a mobile lofty Rohana mountain, Adam's Peak in Ceylon. A certain soldier shook and waved an extremely bright and glistening sword that was terrible like the Kalratri, night of destruction, and that had been preserved well by the weapon maker. Stroking the tip of his spear by means of his fingers, a certain soldier mounted on a horse displayed different kinds of movement in the street. Some soldiers rode on elephants of huge sized bodies, as though on mountains propelled and tossed about by the violent gusts of winds of portentous phenomena. Crores of Daityas were fully equipped with coats of mail and had the following weapons and missiles in their hands, viz. Pattisas, a spear with a sharp edge. There is a long list of uh, weapons. So the footnote says verse number 10 to 19 gives a list of weapons used in medieval India. The varieties of arrows, use of firearms, and projectiles are noteworthy. So crores of Daityas were fully equipped with coats of mail and had the following weapons and missiles in their hands, viz. Patishas, a spear with sharp edge; Mudgaras, a hammer-like weapon; Viduras, thunderbolts; Bhindipalas, a short javelin thrown with hand; Druhanas, Druganas, mallets, wooden maces; Bhushundis, firearms; Kutharas, daggers; Mushalas, pestles, clubs; Gadas, maces; Shatagnis, bombarding instruments; Trishikhas, three-pronged arrows; Vishikhas, iron-tipped arrows; Andhachakras, Ardhachakras, arrows with crescent-shaped tips; Mahachakras, great discuses; Vakranga, Vakrangas, arrows of crooked shapes; Uragananas, serpent-faced arrows; Phanishirsha Prabhedas, different kinds of missiles shaped like hoods of serpents; different kinds of bows, different kinds of bows made of horns, etc., batons, kshep, kshep, uh, kshepanika shastras, different kinds of slings, and similar devices for discharging missiles. Vajravanas, adamantine arrows, drasadvaras, excellent rocks and pebbles for hurling, missiles of various sorts and shapes such as Yavamadhyas, Mushtimadhyas, Valalas, and Khandalas, daggers of hundreds of varieties with angular middles, fang shaped tips, etc., nooses of diverse varieties, pashatundas, snouts like nooses, kakatundas, weapons shaped like the beaks of crows, and thousands of similar weapons and missiles very dreadful and capable of destroying living beings. They rode on various animals and birds such as horses, elephants, donkeys, camels, wolves, hounds, crows, etc., vultures, herons, tigers, and others on lions, etc. Some rode on sharavas, 8-footed fabulous animals, beherundas, a species of birds, boars, vyalas, savage beasts, snakes, ghosts, etc. Thus, seated on various vehicles, they marched against Lalita with violent fury, filling up their minds. Bhanda sent the crooked and fraudulent Danava, the chief of an army division named Durmada, against Lalita along with 10 Akshohinis, accompanied by those exceedingly mighty soldiers of leonine strength, who appeared to be desirous of burning the entire universe. That general proceeded towards Lalita, splitting and piercing the 14 worlds by means of loud sounds of big war drums and shouting and howling, along with boisterous laughs. Durmada went in her direction. Thereafter, on being commanded by Bhandasura, Kutilaksha of great strength deployed Talajangha along with 10 Akshohinis at the eastern entrance to the city of Shunyaka for the sake of its protection. At the southern entrance to the city he employed a Daitya named Talabhuja, accompanied by 10 Akshohinis, for its protection. At the western entrance to the city he appointed the Daitya named Talagriva along with 10 Akshohinis for its protection. He directed Talaketu, the exceedingly powerful Daitya, to be at the northern entrance to the city along with 10 Akshohinis for the sake of its protection. He directed 10 Akshohinis to stay in a circle along the rampart wall in the cubicles and bunks over the copings. Thus, by means of 50 Akshohinis of soldiers, he made due arrangements for the defense of the city of Shunyaka and reported it to his master. Kutilaksha reported, O Lord, at the behest of your majesty, armies have been deployed for the defense of the city. At the outset, Durmada has already been dispatched towards that wicked Lalita. That frail woman can easily be made frustrated merely by means of our domestic servants. Yet the royal convention is that proper arrangement for the defense of the city should be made. After saying thus to Bhanda, the ruler of the Daityas, the excessively haughty Kutilaksha, accompanied by the commanding officers of different divisions of the army, kept the entire army on the alert and ready to act. A Danava had previously been sent as a messenger by Kutilaksha in the company of any army with tumultuous tumultuous uproar, he had encircled the army of Lalita. With a great clatter and clutter, thousands of Daitya soldiers waved their swords and fell on the soldiers of Shakti. Those dreadful Shaktis, with boisterous laughters and shouts, fought with the Danavas with their swords gleaming brightly. The footnote says, Duta and breeds Yastu, the Danavas, who was dispatched previously. In the course of that war between Shaktis and Danavas, the three worlds became exceedingly agitated, and heavy dust spread throughout the sky. Intensified in the shafts of the chariots, amplified by the trumpets of elephants, and scattered by the deep breaths of the horses, the dust columns rose up in the sky. On seeing him rushing in accompanied by 10 Akshohinis, Sampath Saraswati furiously ran towards him in the battlefield. Horses and elephants in their route occupied and guided by the Shaktis equal in strength to Sampatkari, thrashed and smashed the army of Danavas. When the noisy mutual fight gathered intensity with clattering and cluttering melee, war drums were sounded loudly and dust columns were raised profusely. Great streams of blood of thousands of Danavas struck down by the Shaktis began to flow here and there, torn and cut off by the arrows, and banners rolled and wallowed, scattering their emblems along with scores of umbrellas. The myriads of umbrellas that had fallen on the battleground red with blood could be compared to the moon in the midst of red clouds at dusk. Like the mass of flames of the Kalpa fire that envelops the fine ocean, the soldiers of Daityas surrounded the army of Shaktis. Heaps of heads of the Danavas rolled down on the battlefield when the necks of Danavas had been chopped off by the sharp edge of the brilliant weapons of the army of Shaktis. The battleground became entirely filled with heads with lips bitten and firmly pressed by the teeth, terrible with knitted eyebrows and with eyes turned red due to fury. When the battle that terrified all worlds thus began, Shaktis, who became excessively furious, thrashed and smashed the army of the Daityas. Struck down by the weapons of Shaktis and hit by the armies of um, goddess Sampadevi, in this manner the Danavas fell down senseless here and there, and died there on the battlefield. Thereupon Durmada, the suppressor of enemies, encouraged his army that had been utterly vanquished and routed, mounted a camel immediately and rushed against the army of Shaktis. Goaded furiously and occupied by Durmada, the long-necked camel vehicle with elevated back moved ahead quickly. The Daityas, with fury in their minds, followed the vicious Durmada, who was seated on a camel. Desirous of fighting with Shaktis, he consoled the frightened Danavas. Like the cloud that showers the forest with water, he showered the circular military array of Sampatkari's forces in all quarters with arrows with their points dazzling brilliantly. Struck and hit with many arrows by that Daitya of unbearable inherent strength, In the course of battle, the army of Sampatkari became as though stunned and stupefied for a moment. With her eyes reddened on account of anger, Sampadambika rode on the elephant Ranakolahala and fought with him. Her hand, that appeared more beautiful when the tinkling bangles moved to and fro, drew the bowstring in the course of battle up to her ear. Due to the dexterity and quickness with which her hand moved, no one saw the drawing of the string or the discharge of the arrows. The bow was seen in a circular form only when the arrows were fixed. The arrows discharged forth from the bow of Sampatkari came rapidly into contact with the sun's rays in the sky, and their tips shone clearly. The arrows then burned the enemies. The fight between her, that is, goddess, and Durmada was excessively intensified. Flames issued forth when the arrows came into clash with one another. Darkness was caused by the arrows of Sampad Devi and the demon, discharged and scattered by them at the outset as they concealed the sun. In the meantime, sparks and flames were ignited by the rapid clash of the arrows, and they had the appearance of eddies and whirlpools. The elephant Ranakolahala mounted uh, the elephant Ranakolahala mounted by that lady of excellent hips, that is Sampadambika, exhibited many kinds of valorous feats in the course of battle. He, the elephant, thrashed a few Daityas with his trunk, some by kicking them with his feet, other Danavas by hitting them with his raised up tusks as powerful as iron clubs, others with lashing blows of his tail as tough as stems of trees. Other enemies with shrieks and howls, still others with the heavy pressures of his huge body, others by piercing them with his nails, and some Daityas by butting upon them with his huge head. Thus the elephant of Sampad Devi displayed various feats of cleverness and bravery. With his face reddened with wrath, Durmada hit and removed a precious gem from the crown of Sampatkari with a powerful and tough arrow. Thereat her eyes became red with anger. Durmada was hit with arrows discharged by her. Wounded by them on the chest, he gave up his ghost instantaneously. Thereupon the excellent soldiers in the army of Shaktis shouted uproariously. Many other excellent Danavas, the foremost among the soldiers of Durmada, were killed by them. Those who survived death among Daityas were vanquished completely. They fled from battlefield and took refuge in the city of Shunyaka. On hearing that news, the lord of Danavas became furious, as though he blazed forth within himself, due to his own intrinsic mighty power. Surveying all round with savage eyes, he placed his hand on his sword and spoke to the chief commander of the armies, Kutilaksha, who was near him. How did that wicked woman strike down the mighty Durmada in the fight? Mischievous and grievous indeed is the way of fate. Neither among the Suras, nor among the Yakshas, nor among the leading Uragas serpents was his powerful attack ever withstood. even that Durmada has been killed by a feeble woman. Do indeed dispatch the general named Kuranda, who is proud of taking part in battles, in order to defeat that wicked woman and drag her by plaited hair violently. On being sent forth thus by him, Kutilaksha called upon Kuranda of great strength with brawny arms to present himself in front of the Lord. Kuranda came there and made obeisance to his master. Kutilaksha said to him, "Go and ask the soldiers to be ready. You are an adept in the employment of Maya, O soldier, skilful in divers wonderful tactics in war. You are equally skilful in treacherous battle. Thrash and defeat that woman." Thus directed by Kutilaksha in the presence of his lord, King Kuranda, of fierce exploit set out immediately from the city. The dreadful Kuranda, the elder brother of Durmada, went to the battle surrounded by 20 Akshohinis of soldiers. By means of his elephants, horses, and foot soldiers, he appeared to pound and suppress the sphere of earth. Though he was haunted by the evil spirit of grief and anger, he was steady and bold in his mind. Seated on his horse of great velocity, he galloped on, enveloping the extremities of cardinal points by means of dust columns. He took up his horn-made bow and made a dreadful eye-twanging sound. With continuous discharge of arrows, he showered the great army of Sampatkari. He taunted and threatened goddess Sampatkari thus: "O sinful woman, you have killed my younger brother Durmada, who was justifiably proud of his ability in war. In vain do you possess a great haughtiness with only an iota of real valor. Look, with these iron arrows I shall now and here dispatch you to the city of Antaka, god of death. My Ranaputanasa, evil demoness of battle, drink the exceedingly tasty and heartening spit of female blood of extraordinary nature gushing out from the crevices open wounds of your body. O vile woman, you will now reap the fruit of sin arising out of the slaughter of the younger brother. See the prowess of my arms." After threatening Sampatkari seated on an excellent elephant, he encouraged his army to attack and subjugate the army of Shaktis. Thereupon Chandi, who prepared herself to thrash and smash the army of Kuranda of great might, encouraged her own army. Getting interested in an unusually delightful battle, she, Chandi, came there riding on her horse and spoke these affectionate words to her, Sampatkari. "Dear friend, Sampatkari, may my words be listened to with love. Hand over the fight with this fellow to be pursued by me, resulting in good benefits. Forbear a while. This fellow will be engaged by me in fight. You have been requested in the capacity of a friend. Do not have any hesitation in this regard." On hearing these words of hers, Sampadevi of pleasant smiles turned away her army that was about to face Kuranda. Horses equal in velocity to the wind and appearing like the billows of the ocean of the army were mounted by the Shaktis, having a luster similar to that of the rising sun. With their hard hoofs they frequently scraped the ground. They rushed against the army of Kuranda in a single file. The Danavas of haughty nature were encouraged by Kuranda. They fought with Shaktis in the army of Ambika seated on a horse. These Shaktis were conversant with the workings of minds of horses in the course of the battle. They were skillful in the different manipulations of the bridle in order to make the horses turn back, spring, etc. They could encourage the horses through signs from the tips of fingers or toes. They were equally good at guiding the horses in their different movements in treading with their hoofs and 5 types of trots and paces. When the fight between Shaktis and demons went on like thus, the goddess mounted a speedy horse named Aparajita. Riding the horse, she rushed against Kurandaka of evil conduct. Goddess Turanganana, Goddess Turaganana, horse-faced, who appeared delicate and graceful, Goddess Turaganana horse-faced, who appeared delicate and graceful, with the braid of hair moving to and fro, who was as dazzling as the digit of the autumnal moon, whose face was as beautiful as the sphere of the moon, that is, red at dusk, smilingly took up her jewel set bow and showered Kuranda with series of arrows. Arrows fitted with golden feathers were discharged by the goddess seated on the horse, spread over the extremities of quarters. They pervaded 10 directions. Kuranda of fierce exploits, the elder brother of Durmada, furiously showered the goddess mounted on the horse by means of arrows issuing forth from the saranga bow. Even the horse of the goddess seated on the horse speedily split and hit the army with its hard and dreadful hoofs. It thrashed and smashed Danavas. Many of the armies of that enemy fainted and swooned from far at the neighing sound of that horse, whose sound resembled the portentous roar of the ocean at the time of ultimate dissolution of the universe. The Hyasana, horse-seated goddess, moving about here and there among the troops of Daityas, released her divine weapon, Pasha, Nuz, of blazing appearance. From that Pasa, crores of other Pasas, as terrible as serpents, issued forth. They bound the entire army and overpowered them. Thereupon Kurandaka, who had become furious on account of the fact that his soldiers had been bound, cut off with a single arrow the strings of her jewel set bow. Abandoning the bow when the string had been cut off, Hayasana, who had become very furious, struck at the chest of that vicious fellow with her goad. The life blood of Kurandaka was quaffled. um the life blood of Kurandaka was quaffed by that blazing god. Thereupon he fell down on the ground like a tree hit by thunderbolt. Some dreadful putanas issuing forth from that god devoured the entire army, along with the blood oozing out of the nose, um, the blood oozing out of the nose, and vanished thereafter. When Kuranda, the leader of 20 Akshohinis, was killed thus, the Daityas who survived death fled quickly. On hearing that Kurandaka was struck down in the battle along with his younger brother by the armies of Shaktis, the lord of Shunyaka heaved a deep sigh like a hissing serpent.